Hello, it's Dispeller, and I am here with our boundaries reading. We are actually on conflict, I believe, let's see, conflict number 3, I think. Yeah, we were talking about, I believe, the aggressive compliant or compliant aggressive controller last time. This is the compliant manipulative controller. And this is going to be a long reading, so buckle your seatbelts. Kathy, I'm in a real jam, and you're the only one I can depend on to help me out. I can't get a babysitter for the kids. I have this church meeting. Kathy listened to the plight of her friend Sharon. It was the usual story. Sharon neglected to plan for events, to call ahead for sitters. She often called Kathy to help out in these self-induced emergencies. Kathy hated being stuck in this position. Sharon didn't do it on purpose, and she needed her for a good cause, but Kathy still felt used and exploited. What was she to do? Many friendships get stuck in this interaction between compliance and manipulative controllers. Why do we call Sharon controlling? She's not consciously trying to manipulate her friend. However, no matter what her good intentions are, when she's in a jam, Sharon uses her friends. She takes them for granted, thinking they shouldn't mind doing a friend a favor. Her friends go along saying, well, that's just Sharon. They stifle their resentment. Let's run this conflict through our boundary checklist. Number 1, what are the symptoms? The compliant, Kathy, feels resentment at the manipulative controller's, Sharon's, last-minute requests. Kathy feels as though her friendship is being taken for granted. She begins to avoid her friend. 2, what are the roots? Sharon's parents rescued her from every jam, from finishing term papers at 3 o'clock a.m. to lending her money when she was well into her 30s. She lived in a very forgiving universe where nice people would always help her out. She never had to face her own irresponsibility and lack of discipline and planning. As a child, Kathy didn't like her mother's hurt look when she said no. She grew up afraid of hurting others by setting boundaries. Kathy would do anything to avoid conflict with friends, especially with Sharon. 3, what is the boundary conflict? And by the way, before I go on, this is why I guess I love labels. And if I ran the world, everybody would be labeled. We would know everything about everybody right out in the open, what kind of childhood they had. We might not know details, but we would pretty much know this person came from a background where they were abused by their mother or their father or whatever. That way, when we ran into them, like we could plug a little, I don't know, maybe not a chip because that gets kind of eerie, but you push a button or something and their whole background would light up. So you'd know exactly who you're dealing with. And if you wanted to deal with them in an ideal world, a utopian world, maybe kind of a sci-fi utopian world. But that's how Dispeller's brain works. She's a little bit cuckoo sometimes. Mm-hmm. And my husband will vouch. But that would make things so much easier if you knew that somebody was coming at you with another favor request, but you knew that the reason why they did it was because they had everything handed to them all their life and they grew up that way. So, that would solve the problems right there, in my opinion. Okay, anyway, we don't live in an ideal society or a utopian world or where we know everybody's business. And as we've seen on YouTube, it's not always good to know everybody's business anyway. Anyhow, but then again on YouTube, how do you know what's true and what's not about the business? I was thinking of if there was a way to do it with truth, not just random stuff that people dug up and created the way they wanted. All right, I do digress. Kathy would do, I already read that. Okay, so what's the boundary conflict? Sharon doesn't plan ahead and take responsibility for her schedule. When responsibilities get away from her, she calls out to the nearest compliant for help, and Kathy comes running. 4, who needs to take ownership? Kathy, the motivated party in this conflict, sees how her never-ending yes contributes to Sharon's illusion that she doesn't ever have to plan ahead. Kathy needs to stop feeling like a victim and take responsibility for saying no. 5, what does she need? Kathy needs to connect with others who will support her as she looks at the boundary issues between her and her friend. 6, how does she begin? Kathy practices saying no with supportive friends. In a supportive atmosphere, she learns to disagree, to state her opinion, and to confront. They all pray for strength and guidance in this relationship. 7, how does she set boundaries? At their next lunch, Kathy tells Sharon about her feelings of being used and taken advantage of. She explains how she'd like a more mutual relationship. Then she lets her friend know that she won't be taking any more emergency babysitting jobs. Sharon, unaware of how she was hurting her friend, is genuinely sorry about the problem. She begins to take more responsibility for her schedule. After a few futile attempts to get Kathy to babysit at the last minute and having to miss a few important meetings, she starts planning for events a week or two ahead of time. Not really. I'll tell you what usually happens in these cases. Sharon, unaware of how she's hurting her friend, may eventually, she'll try a few more times. And then when Kathy doesn't give in, Sharon goes and sponges off of another friend. That's another compliant. That's how it happens in the real world. But in the ideal world that this book is talking about, Sharon gets the message and tries to plan ahead of time. But we don't live in this perfect world that this book seems to think that everything is going to happen with. Okay. Number 8, what happens next? The friendship grows and deepens. Over time, Kathy and Sharon laugh over the conflict that actually brought them closer. Yeah, rarely. Come on now. You guys, tell me a time when you dealt with somebody that took advantage of you, and you were the compliant, you were the one that felt it was your job to just, placate everybody's little whim when they had one. And then eventually you got to the point where you were fed up, you confronted it just like they said to do. And you guys you reconciled and lived happily ever after. Come now, tell me, I want to hear your story. Put it in the comments below, please. And thank you. Conflict number 4, compliant non-responsive. By the way, that was a compliant manipulative controller. So the compliant to the manipulative controller. Okay. Conflict 4, compliant non-responsive. Remember the Marcia-Tammy friendship at the beginning of this chapter? If you don't, just try to go back and re-listen. I'll try to post the video if that helps, probably from yesterday's video. One friend doing all the work and the other coasting illustrates the compliant non-responsive conflict. One party feels frustrated and resentful. The other wonders what the problem is. Marcia sensed that the friendship wasn't as important to Tammy as it was to her. Let's analyze the situation. Number 1, what are the symptoms? Marcia feels depressed, resentful, and unimportant. Tammy, however, may feel guilty or overwhelmed by her friend's needs and demands. 2, what are the roots? Marcia always feared that if she didn't control her important attachments by doing all the work, she'd be abandoned. So she became a Martha to everyone else's Mary, a worker instead of a lover. Tammy has never had to work hard for friendships. Always popular and in demand, she's passively taken from important friendships. She's never lost anyone by not being responsive. In fact, they work harder to keep her around. 3, what is the boundary conflict? There could be 2 boundary conflicts here. First, Marcia takes on too much responsibility for the friendship. She's not letting her friend bear her own load, Galatians 6:5. Second, Tammy doesn't take enough responsibility for the friendship. She knows that Marcia will come up with activities from which she can pick and choose. Why work when someone else will? 4, who needs to take ownership? Marcia needs to take responsibility for making it too easy for Tammy to do nothing. She sees that her attempts to plan, call, and do all the work are disguised attempts to control love. 5, what do they need? Both women need support from other friends. They can't look objectively at this problem without a relationship or 2 of unconditional love around them. 6, how do they begin? Marcia practices setting limits with supportive friends. She realizes she will still have friendships in which each friend carries her own weight if she and Tammy break off their friendship. 7, how do they set boundaries? Marcia tells Tammy about her feelings and informs her she will need to take equal responsibility for their friendship in the future. In other words, after Marcia calls, she won't call again unless Tammy does. Marcia hopes that Tammy will miss her and begin calling. If worse comes to worse, and the friendship atrophies due to Tammy's unresponsiveness, Marcia has gained something. She's learned it wasn't a mutual connection in the first place. Now she can grieve, get over it, and move on to find real friends. Number 8. What happens next? The mini crisis changes the character of the friendship permanently. And it either exposes it for a non-relationship or it provides soil for the rebuilding of a better one. Questions about friendship boundary conflicts. Boundary conflicts in friendships are difficult to deal with because the only cord tying the relationship together is the attachment itself. There's no wedding ring There's no job connection. There's just a friendship, and it often seems all too fragile and in danger of being severed. People who are in the above conflicts often raise the following questions when they consider setting boundaries on their friendships. So this would be what we're about to talk about are some of the questions that people have about boundaries in their friendships, like things they're asking themselves, maybe why they're not setting boundaries. And they're saying, well, is this going to happen if I don't set a boundary? Or if I do set a boundary, will this happen? That's what's coming up next. So question number 1, aren't friendships easily broken? Most friendships have no external commitment, such as marriage, work, or church, to keep the friends together. The phone could just stop ringing and the relationship die with no real ripples in the lives of the participants. So aren't friendships at greater risk of breaking up when boundary conflicts arise? This type of thinking has 2 problems. First, it assumes that external institutions such as marriage, work, and church are the glue that holds relationships together. It assumes that our commitments are what hold us together, not our attachments. Biblically and practically, nothing could be further from the truth. We hear this thinking in many Christian circles. If you don't like someone, act like you do. Or make yourself love them. Or commit to loving someone. Or choose to love someone, and the feelings will come. Choice and commitment are elements of a good friendship. We do need more than fair weather friends. However, Scripture, the Bible, teaches us that we can't depend on commitment or sheer willpower, for they'll always let us down. Paul cried out that he did what he didn't want to do. He didn't do what he wanted to do. Romans 7:19. He was stuck. We all experience the same conflict. Even when we commit to a loving friendship, bad things happen. We let them down. Feelings go sour. Simply white-knuckling it won't reestablish the relationship. We can solve our dilemma the same way Paul solved his. Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Romans 8:1. The answer is being in Christ Jesus. In other words, in relationship with Christ, both vertically and horizontally. As we stay connected to God, to our friends, to our support groups, we're filled up with the grace to hang in there and fight out the boundary conflicts that arise. Without this external source of connection, we're doomed to an empty willpower that ultimately fails or makes us think we're omnipotent. Again, the Bible teaches that all commitment is based on a loving relationship. Being loved leads to commitment and willful decision-making, not the reverse. How does this apply to friendships? Look at it this way. How would you feel if your best buddy approached you and said, I just wanted to tell you that the only reason we're friends is because I'm committed to our friendship. There's nothing that draws me to you. I don't particularly enjoy your company, but I will keep choosing to be your friend. You probably wouldn't feel very safe or cherished in this relationship. You'd suspect that you were being befriended out of obligation, not out of love. Don't let anyone fool you. All friendships need to be based on attachment, or they have a shaky foundation. The second problem with thinking that friendships are weaker than institutionalized relationships, such as marriage, church, and work, is in assuming that those 3 aren't attachment-based. It simply isn't true. If it were, wedding vows would ensure a 0% divorce rate. Professions of faith would ensure faithful church attendance. A hiring would ensure 100% attendance at work. These 3 important institutions, so crucial to our lives, are to a large degree attachment-based. It's scary to realize that the only thing holding our friends to us isn't our performance, or our lovability, or their guilt or their obligation. The only thing that will keep them calling and spending time with us and putting up with us is love. And that's the one thing we can't control. At any moment, any person can walk away from a friendship. However, as we enter more and more into an attachment-based life, we learn to trust love. We learn that the bonds of a true friendship are not easily broken. And we learn that in a good relationship, we can set limits that will strengthen, not injure that connection. Question 2. How can I set boundaries in romantic friendships? Single Christians have tremendous struggles with learning to be truth tellers and limit setters in romantic dating friendships. Most of the conflicts revolve around the fear of losing the relationship. A client may say, there's someone in my life whom I like a lot, but I'm afraid if I say no to him, I'll never see him again. A couple of unique principles operate in the romantic sphere. Number 1, romantic relationships are by nature risky. Many singles who have not developed good attachments with other people and who have not had their boundaries respected try to learn the rules of biblical friendships by dating. They hope that the safety of these relationships will help them learn to love, be loved, and set limits. Quite often, these individuals come out of a few months of dating more injured than when they went in. They may feel let down, put down, or used. This is not a dating problem. It's a problem in understanding the purpose of dating. The purpose of dating is to practice and experiment. The end goal of dating is generally to decide sooner or later whether or not to marry. Dating is a means to find out what kind of person we complement and with whom we are spiritually and emotionally compatible. It's a training ground for marriage. This fact causes a built-in conflict. When we date, we have the freedom to say at any time, this isn't working out, and to end the relationship. The other person has the same freedom. What does this mean for the person whose boundaries have been injured? Often she brings immature, undeveloped aspects of her character to an adult romantic situation. In an area of low commitment and high risk, she seeks the safety, bonding, and consistency that her wounds need. She entrusts herself too quickly to someone whom she's dating because her needs are so intense. And she'll be devastated when things don't work out. That would be me in the past many times. This is little like sending a 3-year-old out to the front lines of a battle. Dating is a way for adults to find out about each other's suitability for marriage. It's not a place for young injured souls to find healing. This healing can best be found in non-romantic arenas, such as support groups, church groups, therapy, same-sex friendships. We need to keep separate the purposes of romantic and non-romantic friendships. It's best to learn the skill of setting boundaries in these non-romantic arenas, where the attachments and commitments are greater. Once we've learned to recognize, set, and keep our biblical boundaries, we can use them on the adult playgrounds called dating. 2, setting limits in romance is necessary. Individuals with mature boundaries sometimes suspend them in the initial stages of a dating relationship in order to please the other person. However, truth-telling in romance helps define the relationship. It helps each person to know where he starts and the other person stops. Ignorance of one another's boundaries is one of the most blatant red flags of the poor health of a dating relationship. We'll ask a couple in premarital counseling, where do you disagree? Where do you lock horns? When the answer is, it's just amazing, we're so compatible, we have very few differences, we'll give the couple homework. Find out what you've been lying about to each other. If the relationship has any hope, that assignment will generally help. Question number 3. What if my closest friends are family? My family. Boundary developing individuals sometimes say, but my mother or father or sister or brother is my best friend. They often feel fortunate that in these times of family stress, their best friends are the family in which they were raised. They don't think they need an intimate circle of friends besides their own parents and siblings. They misunderstand the biblical function of the family. God intended the family to be an incubator in which we grow the maturity, tools, and abilities we need. Once the incubator has done its job, then it's supposed to encourage the young adult to leave the nest and connect to the outside world, Genesis 2:24, to establish a spiritual and emotional family system on one's own. The adult is free to do whatever God has designed for him or her. Over time, we're to accomplish God's purposes of spreading his love to the world to make disciples of all the nations, Matthew 28:19 and 20. Staying emotionally locked into the family of origin frustrates this purpose. It's hard to see how we'll change the world when we have to live on the same street. No one can become a truly biblical adult without setting some limits, leaving home, and cleaving somewhere else. Otherwise, we never know if we've forged our own values, beliefs, and convictions, our very identity, or if we are mimicking the ideas of our family. Can family be friends? Absolutely. But if you have never questioned, set boundaries, or experienced conflict with your family members, you may not have an adult-to-adult connection with your family. If you have no other best friends than your family, you need to take a closer look at those relationships. You may be afraid of separating and individuating, of becoming an autonomous adult. Question number 4. How can I set limits with needy friends? I was talking to a woman one day in session who felt extremely isolated and out of control. Setting limits with her friends seemed impossible for her. They were in perpetual crisis. I asked her to describe the quality of her relationships. Oh, I've got lots of friends. I volunteer at the church 2 nights a week. I teach Bible study once a week. I'm on a couple of church committees, and I can sing in the choir. I'm getting exhausted just listening to you describe your week, I said. But what about the quality of these relationships? They're great. People are being helped. They're growing in their faith, and troubled marriages are getting healed. You know, I said, I'm asking you about friendships, and you're answering about ministries. They're not the same thing. She had never considered the difference. Her concept of friendship was to find people with needs and throw herself into a relationship with them. She didn't know how to ask for things for herself. And that was the source of her boundary conflicts. Without these ministry relationships, this woman would have had nothing. So she couldn't say no. Saying no would have plummeted her into isolation, which would have been intolerable. But it happened anyway. She had come for help because of burnout. When the Bible tells us to comfort with the comfort with which we are comforted, 2 Corinthians 1:4, it's telling us something. We need to be comforted before we can comfort. That may mean setting boundaries on our ministries so that we can be nurtured by our friends. We must distinguish between the two. A prayerful look at your friendships will determine whether you need to begin building boundaries with some of your friends. By setting boundaries, you may save some important ones from declining. And when romantic dating relationships lead to marriage, you'll still need to remember how to build and maintain boundaries, even in this most intimate of human relationships. And that, my dear dispellers, is the end of chapter 8. That was Boundaries and Your Friends. And the next one is Boundaries and Your Spouse, which I probably will do that. Not now, obviously, but I'll do that. Boundaries and Your Children. For those of you that have children, I may do that. I may not. I'm not sure. I don't have children that are at home anymore. But I don't know. I may leave that for you guys to read. Boundaries and Your Work, Boundaries and Yourself. It's a long, long book. So, you know, I get burnt out sometimes talking about the same things, just like you would reading about the same things. So I'm going to kind of pick and choose here. All right. I can't wait till the end part of the book, though, where it says developing healthy boundaries. It'll be kind of interesting. So let me let you know that if you have not subscribed yet, you may be missing out on a good channel. I don't know. Talk to other people that are here on the channel that are the Dispeller family. I'd love to have you aboard with us. Hit the subscribe button if you might want to check us out. Also, hit the thumb up for a like on my channel. That helps me get my messages out to more people, of course. Subscribe, I already said. Like, hit the bell so you don't miss future uploads. And what else? What else do? We like, we subscribe, we hit the bell, and we share. So tell other people that I'm here. Tell them what I do. Tell them about the book readings. Tell them I go live sometimes. Whatever you want to tell them. Whatever you think of my channel. Spread the news for me. I would appreciate it. Please and thank you. Have a great day. I am so thankful that you're here today. And I'm going to get skedoodling. I'm still reading my friend Sandy's book, Cross My Heart. Hoping to do an interview with her soon, but I got to get through the book and get my questions written down. I do have an interview coming up with Jeff, I believe on Friday, early evening sometime possibly. I'm going to let him know when I know my schedule a little bit better, and then you'll know too. I will promo it. All right. Good to see everybody here. Thanks for watching and listening and paying attention and joining along with me in the Boundaries series. Have a great one, and we'll see you soon. Shalom.